into the limits of how many people we can have live. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the October 9th IPython Jupyter Dev Meeting. And we have a full house today. Let's get going with the agenda. Can somebody please read the first item on the agenda, since my computer needs like an hour to open Hackpad?
It's widget related.
Okay.
The only item on the agenda.
Yeah.
Widgets. How to handle loading widgets from third-party JavaScript libraries. So the essential problem we're trying to solve is that if you, at the moment, widgets, like the widget definitions, live in a single registry, and JavaScript modules are expected to register them. But if you load a module and immediately try to create a widget because of the whole async nature of JavaScript, then you can end up failing to create it because it tries to look up that name in the registry before it's been registered. So Sylvan and I have two different approaches to fixing this.
So these are 6494 and 6632 are the two approaches. Okay.
So my approach was, so the widget object on the Python side already has synchronized fields for the name, which is what's used to look up in the registry, of its model and of its view. And what I have added for now for the view, and I'm planning to add for the model and a similar thing for COM targets, is a concept of a module that goes along with that in a separate field. So when you try to instantiate it, if there's a module specified, then it looks that up in it uses require to load that, and then takes the model name from that. So the JavaScript equivalent of accessing an attribute from a module. Yeah, and if the if the module name is not specified, then it looks up in the registry the same as before. We briefly thought about doing away with the registry entirely, but it was decided to preserve that for the currently hypothetical case of alternative front ends for the same.
Black.
And so the disadvantage of this, as I understand it, is that the kernel side, the Python side of the widgets, will end up encoding requirejs paths, and the idea is that is hard coding front end information on the kernel side and makes the development of alternate front ends more difficult.
Well, it does and it doesn't. It hard codes the paths that we use in the front end, and so other front ends would have to use the same strings as keys.
Right.
So it's like widget/int.
Yeah. No.
So it's not hard coding require or anything. It's just our file structure in the front end governs the string keys that are the API for selecting them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually tie you to require or anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, both of the pull requests have that same property. And
yeah, the other pull request has the exact same thing. It's just it's just done in a Python method. I don't know. It doesn't seem different to me.
And so Sylvan, hold on, let me see. Is Sylvan or Jason here to describe the approach in the other pull request?
Nope.
Oh,
they were both here, but they're not.
A minute ago.
So John, do you understand this one, or Thomas?
I don't understand it any better.
Yeah, your microphone's not doing anything.
So adds a
Oh, we have max volume here.
No.
some reason my headphone is super weird.
No one's saying anything at the moment.
Yeah, but when
All right, have you checked?
I have it, yep. But it's okay. It's not too
Yeah, so this isn't a...
So Jason is saying in the chat, we can map any path to any other path using aliases. My contention is that doesn't help because something still has to say like where you're actually loading this widget from.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, no, from that perspective, it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, overall, I would say I rather like this idea of encoding these paths in the models. The models get sent over to JavaScript. JavaScript just looks them up and loads them on the fly. And I to the point where I would love to get rid of the manual registry, honestly.
Yeah.
It's just really clean, and having to register things by hand is just messy. And so I'd like to understand the ways in which, if Jason and Sylvan feel like this is too hard, like it's too hardwired to JavaScript and requirejs, because I don't really, I mean, these paths are generic enough that I think alternate front ends could interpret them in an appropriate way.
I apologize because what happened was as Thomas was beginning to explain, all of my Chrome instances segfaulted simultaneously, so I had to move over to this office and I lost a little bit. I don't want you to repeat the whole thing. I know everybody has heard it, but can you very, very briefly try to kind of like capture the gist of what that path encoding is, so I understand the conversation better?
So there's two alternative approaches to specifying like the requirejs module to load for a widget. There's two separate parts, like for the widget model and for the widget view, because those are separate things on the JavaScript side.
Mm-hmm.
So my PR only does the view at the moment, but I'm planning to apply the same approach to models once this is done, and that is to put a field called like view module into the widget model, so that just gets synced over to the JavaScript side, and it can use that to load. So it loads it. It uses require every time you construct a widget using that. It uses require to find it and relies on requires caching to do the right thing.
And that gets rid of our manually maintained registry altogether.
We had considered
it would, or it could.
It could. We had considered it. We had considered that, but we decided to leave the registry there. So if it doesn't have a module key, it will look it up in the registry, and that was done for sort of independence, like front-end independence, so that a hypothetical alternative front-end could specify like slide view means this class, and not have to worry about the module paths.
Okay.
Whereas Sylvan's adds a separate call, which you would call before displaying your widget, saying like load view module require path on the Python side, and then it uses some I think is it promises machinery in JavaScript to ensure that the front end doesn't try to construct it until that's loaded. Though my understanding of that is it has the drawback that you can never say this module this view name is invalid, because at the point at which you would say that, you don't know.
You guys dropped off for a second.
Sylvan cannot connect. Sylvan is saying on the chat that he can't actually connect, and we only have 7 people connected. So
yes, it's not full.
It's not that the chat is full.
Their network seems to consistently have problems.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
I mean, without Sylvan or Jason to explain to us what aspect of of this they might find insufficient or what. I mean, it seems pretty sensible to me, but I haven't been looking at this code forever, so I really can't say much.
I mean, I do think making widgets as front-end agnostic as possible is important. But my feeling is that what Thomas has is probably the best overall approach to achieve that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think Thomas's solution is the same, but better. It's just aesthetically, I think it looks better and it does the same thing. But I don't think, at least, I don't think we can completely get rid of the manual registry. So I think that's a separate topic, just because of people that are implementing widgets on the fly in the notebook. It's a pain in the ass to set an alias on requirejs, like on the fly, like without a module.
Yeah, it's hard to put a module into requirejs.
Yeah. That's not an actual module.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it kind of breaks that workflow, and I like to use that a lot. Like when I'm prototyping widgets, I develop in the notebook, and so that would be broken.
But just to clarify, Thomas, yours does not use requirejs aliases, or does it?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason it couldn't. I mean, if you put requirejs aliases into the config, I mean, it just makes requirejs calls. If there are aliases defined, it will use them like any other requirejs call will. But my intention with this is that it's primarily for third-party widgets like my own. I have the Turtle in the Notebook project mobile Shalonian, and in that case, you know, it doesn't have a way to put an alias into the config.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay.
The only downside I saw, or the only upside to Sylvan's PR that I saw was that you have fine control over when it gets loaded, so you don't have to load it on module import. That's what he suggests. So he suggests having like a symmetric approach, where when you do a Python import, it's doing the JavaScript import at the same time. But you have control over where, so you can put that call that loads the JavaScript files anywhere.
Yeah,
So
that's a really tricky thing, because the import might happen when the notebook UI is not there, and you import again. That
exactly.
the import time machinery won't happen.
Exactly.
So I don't think that's something you can sensibly.
Yeah, and I don't even think we want to expose that flexibility for that reason, because people can get into trouble.
Yeah, my design was kind of loosely based on something that we do in several places in like the pure Python code, which is if you need to specify a Python object by a string, you specify its full import path, and then whatever needs to use that can use we have a like import string function, which will go and find that. Okay.
Moving on.
Do we want to move design stuff towards the top?
Yeah.
So Adrian and other people interested in design here, let me do that. Okay. So design workflow. We had been trying to have Adrian work using Git through the GitHub app. And basically, what we discovered is that the GitHub app works fine as long as you're only working alone on a repo, and you never ever have to rebase, merge, or grab things from upstream, and it was just becoming unworkable. We ended up with diverged branches and conflict markers and Adobe Illustrator files, and it's just not, the GitHub app isn't designed for that. And so I had talked to Fernando, I don't know, probably a week or two ago about having Adrian switch over to just doing all of her work in Dropbox. and I think everyone saw that I've set up a shared Dropbox and shared it with everyone. And she's started to move things over. I think that the main question is, how do we want to do design review, and then how do we want to sort of sync with our Jupyter design repo?
Yeah, it's tricky. I've thought a little bit more about it, and it would be nice to have a more cleanly integrated workflow, because doing the review work on issues and pull requests, that aspect of it I think did work well. Sort of just having the material there and having the screenshots and the conversation and the discussion, that was actually quite nice. Yeah. And I sort of worry about, we're trying to balance here on the one hand, or several things. One is not having too many ways of doing the same thing, which gets confusing in its own way, yep. Right? Not having a workflow for the design aspect that effectively becomes kind of a private little ghetto over here, where the kind of the normal workflow of open discussion and open participation can work. Just having the material there and having the, please show you the conversation and the discussion, that was okay. We just muted Sylvan for now, and we'll come back to the widget discussion, but let's finish this design issue since we started. But at the same time, we can't kind of paralyze the design process while Adrian fights merge conflicts in files that weren't designed for that over there. I mean, this is not an experiment in that, and so I would love to hear people's thoughts, and if anyone has good ideas. I think we need to be pragmatic and make sure that Adrian can work fluidly and efficiently, and I think that should be the priority. But obviously, we need to start bringing that workflow into the rest of the project in a sensible way. Do we grab things that are being done on Dropbox and put them in PRs? But where the nasty low-level GitHub stuff can be done by hand at the terminal? But I'm not sure. I really would like people's ideas on this.
Since I think the issue approach, the issue conversation worked well, I would do that rather than move discussion strictly to chat. Like I think the review, you can just do it in an issue rather than a PR. I mean, just open an issue to talk about things and paste current state.
Paste.
Because that's where most of the review was on things pasted in messages,
right.
not the actual.
You're right. Yeah.
No, I totally agree that way of doing review works really well. And
okay, so then there's no reason not to do that, right?
Yeah.
So issue-based review, basically Adrian can open up an issue and just copy the current images over, and we can review it there. And then what about do we just do at some point bulk updates of the GitHub repo?
Yeah, just kind of do a kind of single commit when a review is done.
I mean, I would still make them PRs, kind of just for the record.
Yeah. Oh, that's
but yeah. we can make them very, very simple PRs where we've agreed on the ideas, and then the PR is mostly a sanity check of, these are the files that changed, by the way. This thing that we were discussing over in issue 123, these are the actual files that changed. We have a chance to look at what's happening to the repo, and pretty much the expectation would be pretty much that if we've agreed on the issue, that PR would be nearly a rubber stamp, and it would have kind of an automatic closes issue 123 kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're not iterating in
the PR. Yes, you're not iterating in the PR, and therefore those PRs, because they're atomic, they're created at that point in time. They're created against master. They'll never have a conflict. They're completely. I mean, there's one or they could have more than one commit if needed, but they're going to be very simple branches that can be merged automatically with the user interface, and no one will have to do crazy rebasing of anything.
Okay. No, let's try that. I mean, we can. I can work with Adrian to make sure that.
Adrian, I'd like to hear what you think of that. I want to make sure that you're happy with how we move forward with this. And I sort of apologize. I mean, I apologize that this caused some frustration on your side, and I understand that we're basically figuring out how to do this efficiently and fluidly, and we were bound to make some some mistakes, and hopefully you'll be a little bit patient with us. But I'd like to make sure that you feel that this is a workflow that makes your life kind of easy, and the last thing we want is kind of to make you miserable in order to babysit our own quirks.
Yeah, I mean, no worries on that, but I really do like the ability to have conversation back and forth, so if that, I mean, as long as that's able to keep happening, that works well for me for just reviews and stuff.
Okay. Well, let's give this a try, and we'll see how it goes, and we keep fine-tuning. But if you're on board with that, it seems like we're not giving up the most important part of it, which is having the back-and-forth discussion be kept publicly and publicly recorded and available up on GitHub. But we're eliminating the messier aspect of branch management. Okay.
Yeah. No, that sounds good.
Anyone else? Anything on this, or can we move on?
I think that's good.
Or rather, move. It seems like
back.
we're not moving on. We're moving back. Sylvan, Jason, do we have you guys?
Can you unmute yourself?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yay!
Hi. Awesome.
Good.
Hi everyone. Yeah, sorry I couldn't make it in the beginning of the conversation, so yeah, just trying to.
Were you able to hear our part, so we don't have to repeat that part, and you can just kind of jump?
Partly because I just used the YouTube video, but I couldn't hear everything. But I mean, before I try to explain my point, I think there are a couple of things where everybody would probably agree, or like more people would agree, which is not directly about the main differences between Thomas' approach and my approach. So first, it's very important to us that we can also overload models. So I think the PR of Thomas, if it is the one that gets merged, should also handle the models, requirejs modules.
It's always been my intention to handle models. I just don't think it's necessary to do it all in one PR.
So for us, I mean, if we were to use that mechanism in the future, it would be easier to change our code in once rather than in twice, doing this for modules and views.
Sure,
and
but just wait until the PRs have gone in.
Pardon?
Sure, but just wait until the other PR is done as well. I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen for models. I'm just saying I will do that in the next PR instead of in this PR.
Okay, but I'm still curious to see how it works for models because you'll need to have the same mechanism of loading the module on first use, and which will not probably follow the same logic as for display or create child view or create model view. So I'm still curious to see how you handle models in that framework.
So,
regarding
is there a? I mean, one thing we really are trying hard to do is have PRs that are smaller rather than larger, and PRs that are that can be reviewed in isolation. So in that regard, I would rather finish this one, review it, and merge it, unless there's a situation where genuinely there's effectively sort of a coupling and there's a high likelihood that the other PR may actually uncover a problem in the first. And in that case, you seem to be arguing that these are not really two PRs, or maybe that they should be reviewed in parallel if the codes can be done that way, which they may not. And so are you arguing that this is not really two PRs, but that is the coupling between the two pieces of the problem is so tight that they can't be reviewed separately? Is that what you're trying to say?
From a user's point of view, if you, as most of our widgets have a custom model and a custom view, switching to this loading mechanism for views and not for models would be a bit odd, and then we'll need to migrate in two stages. So I think for us, it's really important to see that we do everything at the time, rather than trying to adapt this just for the views and then we realize that there is an issue for models, and which will also impact the way you load views, right? So, I mean, in my proposal, and I think it's really independent of this discussion, I already tackled the models and views, but it doesn't mean that my approach is better. It's just not an argument for it. It's just, I'm just saying that for me, it's really important that we tackle both cases in one at once.
I haven't looked closely at the pull requests, but I can at least imagine how that the model loading is sufficiently different that it may uncover sort of generalized abstractions that need to be in place for both models and views. But I don't. So I mean, I understand we like to keep pull requests small for sure, but I'm suspicious that maybe this case it may make sense to try to do the models and the views together.
Sure, and I mean, part of the reason that I'm planning to do them separately is I was initially planning to do both in this PR, and when I went and looked at how widget models work, it was a way that would kind of make this difficult. Essentially, widget models and COM targets were the same thing, and the widget manager registered these proxy things with the COM manager. And we talked that through, and John now has a PR that I haven't been and looked at the details of yet, that 66, 65 separate widget model name from COM target name, that should simplify that mechanism. So my intention is to wait for that to go in and then do the same thing for models and for COM targets.
So
okay. Another point which is a bit orthogonal, sorry.
But that could either be holding your current PR and adding models to it after this gets merged, or doing it in two PRs.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a huge difference which, right?
Yeah.
So another point which is a bit independent of the difference in implementation is the basic registry that we have for models and views. I think that it would be really nice to use to namespace the keys, because a key like box is a very, very generic name, and for people using that registry to create their own widgets without using the requirejs shim would probably want to have their own box. So maybe prefixing the model names and view names by Jupyter or IPython. And I mean, the Zen of Python says that namespaces are a good idea in general. So I think that this is one of the benefits of using requirejs way of loading things. But even in the basic registry, I would really favor of adding a namespace. Regarding
My personal approach, I mean, having only made one widget, admittedly, but my thinking on this is that essentially all third-party widgets I would expect to use the specifier module thing rather than stick to the registry.
Okay, so actually the way I approach the implementation of the requirejs stuff is to actually append that registry with something new whenever you load.
You still use the registry as well as requirejs, okay.
Yeah. So now the differences between the two approaches. So Thomas loads the requirejs module the first time the view is created, while I have a separate loading stage that can be done at loading of the Python module, for example, so that you have symmetry between when you load the Python code and when you load the client code. The other advantage, I think the main advantage of what I propose, maybe it's not the best implementation of that, but the advantage is that the requirejs path doesn't make it into the widget implementation of the Python side, and which isolates the Python implementation from anything coming from the front end. So requirejs path to me is really JavaScript. It's only related to the JavaScript front end, not to any other potential front end.
But it's not in the widget object, but it's still got to be there in the implementation somewhere.
Yeah,
the load
absolutely.
front end has to get a require path, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and
that has to be on the Python side. So the Python has to know the require path.
Yeah.
The way I isolate it from the model or the implementation itself is just by having a separate registry. So I still use the original view names and model names registry to as a separate or additional stage to load a client module.
But that's,
and the other
I don't think that's isolated at all. That's just an extra layer. That's just putting it in
another place.
Different place, but on the same
side.
On the same side, right?
Yeah.
And I at that point, I would say that's starting to make implementing the back end of widgets more difficult for other languages. And that's where I think the requirejs paths make it
require path.
What was that?
Right, because then
what would be more difficult?
The mapping is on the kernel side, right?
The mapping
between whatever short name you use and the require path.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that means that all kernels need to implement that. So all kernels need to know the require path.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. That's already the case, right?
Yes, but I'm trying to establish the point that it doesn't create a. I don't think it creates a functional difference between the two approaches. Both approaches need to know the require path.
And rather than being in the class, it's in a separate function that creates a register, and that separate function could be different depending on the frontend that you are using. For example, that function could be called
the other case,
in the IPython config when you open the notebook. So when you open IPython with a given frontend, you load your widgets and use one of those functions. And when you open IPython with another frontend, you would load the modules, the client modules, using another way. So that separate function call could be really.
But that is itself problematic because our model is that the kernel currently knows nothing about what frontend it's talking to, and we want to, even if we change that, we want to keep as little as possible in the kernel, like doing different things depending on what front end it's talking to.
But IPython notebook config.py is actually something that assumes that you are loading things from the IPython notebook frontend. So
that doesn't affect the kernel.
Oh, you can actually add things to. You can actually decide what's to be run beforehand when you load that frontend, right? From IPython notebook config.
You could put all of your widget specifications in your notebook server config, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. At least that's really not what I'm talking about.
And the whole point is that you can separate and decide and put, front-end specific loading parts in another place in your code than the implementation of the widget itself.
But I don't think that's true. I mean, so for my project, which is a turtle widget, where would it put the call saying load my JavaScript module?
It's up to the client to decide. I mean, the person who uses your widget can actually load the front-end implementation when he wants. Actually, you already have.
Is a programming beginner. They don't know about front ends and kernels and things. They just do import this module.turtle.
Okay, then you put the loading stage as in your module, and which is actually executed at load time.
But then every time you reload the page after the first one, it won't run. Code that runs at import time only runs once.
Yeah.
So when you import again, you can never trigger it again.
Yeah. I mean, you're still going to have custom logic to make sure that that's loaded on the page when an object is actually created in your backend.
Yeah, that's how I did it the first time with the widgets, and that was a problem.
Yeah.
And the but my module, the turtle module, mobile Shlonian, is only running in the kernel, so that shouldn't be doing, that shouldn't be doing if I'm in frontend X, do this, if I'm in frontend Y, do that.
I mean, actually, currently anyway, when you reload the page, you don't even have persistence of your widgets. So
Right, so that means you can never display it again because you can't reload the module.
Yeah.
Right. So you execute it again, and so you have to kill the kernel every time you reload the page in order to get that to work.
Yeah.
If you're loading the model on import, then you refresh the page, you can run all the code again, but you'll never trigger the which will run all the create the model and everything. It'll run all that again, but it won't ever run the load model again because that was
you for the load front-end module.
Yeah, you'd have to explicitly call load, but only every time after the first that you visit the page.
Yeah.
And we don't want to create kind of a workflow that requires that users often put reload, the Python reload function call into their notebooks with their modules, because the semantics of reload are crazy. If you run reload later, you end up with Python, the interpreter gets super confused because you may have objects that point in memory to the old version of the module and the new version of the module. The errors that come out from that are completely incomprehensible. I mean, you get the weirdest kinds of things begin happening in the interpreter, and the last thing we want to do is encourage a workflow where that becomes a common step, because Python behaves so strangely in that context that we really shouldn't be pushing in that direction.
When you call load multiple times,
if you call reload, if you
smart enough about already loaded modules.
No, but what happens is imagine the user, for whatever reason, they have a kernel and they hit page reload, and we tell them, oh, if you hit page reload, obviously you're not going to get the JavaScript, so what you should do is go and call reload on your Python module so that it forces...
No, it's not. It's reload on the front-end module, so I have a load function in my implementation that loads the front-end module.
Yes, what we're saying is if you call that in a Python module at import time, then
it can't be at import time.
That only happens
then it can be
once.
for this reason. Yeah, absolutely.
Because then the only way to trigger code that happens at import time later is by using the Python reload call. And that call, when used frequently, is crazy.
I also think that, speaking of refreshing the page, assuming that we do at some point get some kind of widget persistence designed and implemented, I think having the module to load in the widget models, so it will be persisted with the widget data structure of whatever kind, is probably neater than, I'm sure you can work out a way to save a list of locations to load when the page is reloaded, but then you get into security headaches and things as well. I suppose that's true with both things, but it seems like it would be one less thing to design with when it comes to designing persistence.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. But please implement the models then.
Okay, well, so let's think about that for a second, because I do want to understand whether, because on the one hand, sometimes it is sensible to say, well, this is master in development. If there's something that you need that will be done as two PRs, basically don't work from master in between. Sometimes that may be a sensible thing to say. At the same time, you seem to be arguing that these things really can't be done as two PRs because there's so much coupling between the second stage and the first that they might as well be done as one. Or we can say, well, it's still two stages, even if the second requires a little bit of revisiting of questions, as long as they're done quickly. And basically the next thing that's done is this other one. So I want to understand, before we decide what to do, I want to understand that, and what roles does 6665 play in all of this? Should that be done first? This is Jonathan's COM target changes.
John, do you want to talk about your COM target changes?
Yeah, I mean, it just separates the target name. So there's a target name used to open a COM on the front end, and then a target name used to instantiate a widget model. And right now, those are the same name. This just separates that, so all widgets use IPython.widget as their COM target name, and then the widget framework passes a separate model name to choose what model to instantiate.
We've got the diff up here. It looks very nice and clean. I think the only thing I would change is I would call the model name in the message rather than calling them both target name.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, that looks exactly like what I was thinking of.
Okay, Min is typing that. So my question is, Thomas, if we were to go, let's say for now with the first PR, or not, or just logically, or at least logically changing things so that you could use this, would that make?
So this is unnecessary for the bit I have at the moment. This is necessary for the second stage.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it.
I don't think these two will conflict as they are at present.
Yeah, I think it's different files.
If this gets merged, then I think I can do the second part either in the same PR or as another PR.
Okay, so now second question. Let's imagine that you do the second part, the model part, in a separate PR. Would that PR conflict with the view part? Would it really need the view part to be done? So therefore, they would be chained, and that would argue for either merging view or doing it just as a growing that PR, or will that be genuinely separate, and they could actually be prepared and reviewed in parallel and merged in either order?
I think they're conceptually separate. I mean, I'd be inclined to get the one merged before branching the other, just because it's likely to touch some of the same code, so there's going to be conflicts at the version control level. But I don't think they conflict at a conceptual level. I could be wrong about this, not having tried to do it, but
okay. Because the way it's looking, with 6665 being almost ready, given that it seems pretty clean and the changes are completely minor, it seems like what we're saying is probably finishing the merge of this quickly is easy to do. Then there's the question of, do we grow that one a lot, the view one a lot, or do we just try to tack them quickly back to back, with the understanding that the second one might actually end up like retouching some of the code in the first. So it's effectively a big PR conceptually, but split into two chunks of code. If that's the case, but I do want to hear from Sylvan whether that would be reasonable. I would be inclined to do that as two, just on the general principle that work that is chopped up in smaller units is easier to swallow, but still having them very close back to back to keep the kind of the conceptual cognitive load low and the impact on Sylvan's workflow to a minimum.
That was my thinking.
Sylvan, how would you feel about that if we did 6665, which is very small, very quickly, probably nowish, once Jonathan makes some small changes? Then we do the view quickly. We do the view, which seems to be nearly ready, and there seems to be broad agreement on it. And then Thomas begins working on the model part right away, with the understanding that there may be feedback on the model part that applies to those other changes. But we do them back to back as fast as possible, so that for you it can feel as one big change, but the management of it can be done as two PRs. How does that?
The biggest impact is the one of Thomas. I mean, it's not about his versus mine implementation. It's just that it really changes the signature of create child view, create view or model view. I don't remember the name. I mean, the one where you create a view for a given model.
Because we understand that for you. One of them, if we do it in two, one of them, we understand it's not enough, right? So you would have to wait. You would want to wait for the second one to land before you can actually apply those changes and update your own code. That's a given. But the question is whether that workflow would be reasonable for you if the second one is done quickly. It just lets us chop up the work into units that we can process a little bit more sensibly.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we have not been living very often. We were living like pretty far from the tip of master, and with some of our custom changes, so we can wait.
Okay.
I think the most impacting PR is the current one because of the asynchronous nature now of CreateView, because of the asynchronous nature of requirejs, and which will, as all our widgets are nested. I mean, changing the way views are created is going to force us to change a lot of code anyway. So as soon as we rebase our fork to reset our fork to upstream master, we change a lot of things. Yeah.
But,
so I don't have a problem.
But it seems like we're in reasonably broad agreement that this approach, that the approach that Thomas proposed, if I didn't misunderstand people, that we're going to move forward with it. So those changes, you'll have to make them at some point. So it really it's really a decision on the immediate workflow of 6665. Thomas is first, Thomas is next. Do we do that, and can we do that in a way where you have a chance to provide technical feedback? We don't want to create something that makes it impossible for you to make those updates. We just want to be able to review this code and get it in as efficiently as possible.
It's fine if you really want to make it in 2 stages. In any cases, I would have had to make these changes with my proposal as well, because again, everything becomes asynchronous. So it's not about his versus my implementation. It's really that as soon as this PR gets merged, and as soon as we reset our fork to this revision, we'll need to change all our widgets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I preferred it to be at once, but could be in 2 stages. No problem with me.
Okay, let's go with that plan then. 6665. You finish this one quickly, and then basically immediately start working on the other one. And Sylvan, you obviously give us feedback on anything. We want to make sure that the moment the second one is merged, you actually can make your changes, right? I mean, we know there's going to be work for you on your side, but we don't want to we don't want to do anything that makes it impossible for those changes to come in or absurdly complicated. So just give us feedback on when that second PR arrives, which will be as soon as we can manage. Okay?
Okay. Moving on. Terminal stuff.
So 6614.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the code last night, and the challenge with this is that both the Python server side and the term.js UI needs to be told how many terminal rows and columns it should display.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what determines the physical size of the terminal on the screen. And so you basically need to know for your given font size, et cetera, on the screen, how big is a terminal row and column.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, that logic is a little wonky. Like I'm running into situations where as I resize the window, the page starts to scroll. And I don't know, I at least wanted to bring it up and partially ask John. I mean, John, you have dealt with some really wonky, weird things like this. Do you have any ideas on...
No, I have to look at it closer.
Yeah.
So just to run down for people the way it works at current is that there is a div with the same styling as the terminal and known content, so a known number of rows and columns.
Right.
Sort of floated way off to the left where you can't see it, and there is JavaScript which measures that and then measures the available space in your window to determine like how many rows and columns can fit on your screen. And whenever you resize your screen, the onResize event handler measures it again and updates those numbers.
And I think one thing we need to set is the overflow Y property on the body. Right now, it'll allow it to scroll, and I don't know if hidden is the right answer or show or something, but it shouldn't. The page shouldn't be able to switch to scroll mode, and then also and it may just be in the details of the calculations. I was seeing really weird behavior where as I changed the size of the window, sometimes it would, I mean, the resize event was always firing, but but sometimes a resize event would resize the terminal, and other times it wouldn't, depending on sort of if you're making it smaller versus bigger. And I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up, partially just to see if John, you had any ideas or could take a look at it. With Strata coming up, I know I can't take a look at it.
And one thing that I would propose is that we ping on the list William Stein. He might have some feedback. I know he's dealt with some of this stuff in Cloud SageMath.
And I mean, he uses the same client-side JavaScript.
Which he actually helped get the license on that thing changed for you to use it. So maybe he has some ideas. Maybe he's already dealt with this and he can give us some tips.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
Should it be black on white like all of our personal terminals, or should it be white on black so that it makes sense in the context of everything else? In the browser.
My terminals are black and white, so.
Sorry.
I mean, I use a white on black terminal by default, but I'm not necessarily pushing for that. I would simply like to see both options for real and see which looks better. And have all of us play with both options, because I can see both sides. I feel like basically exactly what you guys just said. I don't know if this is appropriate, but if you're, a lot of people use the notebook for teaching and instruction and everything, and white on black you should never happen on a projector. It's completely illegible. Then we should change the notebook style as a whole. I mean, I use white on. Oh, wait.
No. White on black.
No, you're saying
Everyone's getting this phrase the wrong way around.
Yeah,
black background. Let's say background. So black background or white background. And so black background terminals are terrible when they're displayed. I use a black background terminal as my regular work terminal, but I actually have a terminal profile called light background that I switch to when I'm giving talks.
Yeah, mine's called Demo. It's also got a huge font.
Exactly. Yeah, mine too. Yeah, I changed the font size and I switched the background to be light, because when I can't stand working on a light background terminal, but it's horrible if you're.
I mean, this is always going to be that may not be a relevant point for defaults, because these things are always customizable. It's one of those.
Yeah. It's part of it.
Yeah. And the flip side of teaching with it is that white on black makes it very obvious that this is a terminal, this is something different from your notebook
just nobody
or
will
your
be able to
text editor.
Yeah.
I mean, like if people are using it on their own computer,
right.
it makes it very obvious.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it may be that having a presenter require a bit of customization. Even if it's often used in teaching, there's still typically one presenter versus n users who are using it on their own computer. And so it may be that, the presenter always has to crank their font sizes bigger so that their screen is seen from the back of the room, and that may be different from what people have on their own laptops. So we shouldn't over-optimize for the presenter.
Yeah, all I'm proposing at this point is that in the pull request,
play with both.
That we have it so that in the pull request, for now, put a silly menu item there that allows us to switch, because until it's like our logo design, we just all have to see it and play with it. And that's all I'm proposing at this point. I'm not proposing either answer, and I may.
And actually, I like the idea of adding, even if it's a throwaway ugly menu thing that actually gets removed at the end.
Yeah.
But having a junk, because
adding a menu to the page is not the real thing.
Oh, really?
You have to create elements in the HTML page template, and then you have to bind JavaScript events.
Or a button, whatever. No,
I don't care either.
Whatever. Even a magic, a custom like config magic that sends over, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just something so we can play without restarting the server.
The good news is Matthias has made it, just styled with straightforward CSS, so it's very easy to override that CSS.
Okay, even if it's a command call.
Custom CSS.
Just something that doesn't require shutting the server down and starting it.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question I was going to have is, so can terminal output be a MIME bundle that modifies the script and CSS on the fly?
Stop right there. Now there are terminal emulators that do that.
I know. I'm just
Right?
kidding.
So, but yeah, yeah, that's
Does the terminal actually?
Kyle, go ahead.
Do terminals actually care about the colors that get like set?
so
It seems like terminals.
hilariously, terminals can know a bunch of colors, but they cannot know the foreground or background color.
The terminal itself doesn't care, but but some programs which have default colorings may work better in dark background or light background, and there's no way for them to automatically adapt.
So long ago, IPython, the default terminals on most systems were black background, which is right. But the default terminal on Macs had a white background. So we say, the default color scheme for IPython is if it's a Mac, use light PG, otherwise use Linux, which are bizarre names for color schemes, but whatever. And
Light PG works well on a light background, Linux works well on a dark background.
Yeah.
To fill people in.
And then years and years after that, when we had lots of Mac users, pretty much all of whom, the developer folks like us, most of whom changed the default to a dark background. Yeah. Like, I would like IPython Real say, rather than is it a Mac, say, is it a dark background?
It doesn't exist.
You can't answer that question.
You can't answer that question.
Yeah.
Terminals have not improved in 30 years.
Yeah. So one other thing is right now our main notebook code font is 14 pixels with 17 pixel line heights, and in the terminal we're down at 11 pixels with a 15 pixel line height, and I think it's too small. Like I think we should just match the same font size we use for code.
Use the same less variables for code.
No, exactly. I mean, it's the less variables are there. I think we should just use those and match that.
Less a ton, less variables.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. Do people disagree?
All right. What else? Kyle, creating another dev. Or are we done with? It seems like we're done with the big points on the terminal.
Yeah. Given that people can't join our dev meetings because there's too many slots, there aren't enough slots. Should we consider forking the lab meeting?
Well, do we fork into? I mean, obviously we can have ad hoc, impromptu ones. How many slots in these things? 10?
I think so.
Yeah.
10. We're running out of slots. Okay. So 11:02, not 10:02. Whoever typed it.
That was Matthias.
Matthias, it's 11:02, not 10:02.
That's someone who doesn't have to guess the time zone.
Yeah. So
I mean, I asked because, Min and I were having impromptu talks, but it seemed like there were discussions that should be open to everyone.
Yeah. No, and we should strive for that as much as possible. I mean, we can have 2 weekly ones. I would. This time is probably not a bad one, in that it covers a lot of people. Yeah. If we're going to do 2 a week, I would suggest Tuesday and Thursday. Just kind of a standard thing. Matthias is saying, please, 30 to 15 minutes earlier.
You could do 9:30. That's fine.
Oh, I'm even fine changing these to 9:30. I mean, or 9 even. I don't care.
Okay. Yeah, we can do
9 Tuesdays.
What's that?
I was just agreeing with 9 Tuesdays. That sounds good to me.
Or Matthias, you should just move to California.
Yeah, Matthias, why don't you do that instead?
One day we'll get a contributor in Japan, and they'll be using us.
Once you have enough people spread around the world, many projects struggle with that. Who do you who do you saddle with the miserable 3 in the morning meeting?
The one in France.
Or a 4 a.m. meeting. But for now, we're just trying to keep poor Matthias from going crazy. So, yeah, we can move 1 hour earlier, and we can move to having 2 a week.
Do you want to just do 2 general meetings a week? Just spend twice as much time? Because part of the reason...
No. We would try to segregate topics.
Just,
yeah, we would try to segregate topics.
Yeah, I think that's...
I don't think 10 is... I don't think we have too many... I don't think the number of slots is the problem. Like, we shouldn't have a meeting with more people than fit in a Google Hangout.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good point. So it's more having 2 slots, and different people can come to the 2 different ones.
Yeah, that would be the main.
Yeah. We have 2 agendas, and we have 2 slots, and people can come because obviously the other option would be to have them in parallel, but the problem is that makes it impossible if the person needs to be in both.
Yeah, there's going to be some overlap.
And there will be some overlap, and that overlap will vary. But this gives a chance for people. Okay, 2 slots per week. And we're moving them by, let's move them a half hour, not an hour.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have to deal with the joys of Bay Area traffic, and being here at 9 a.m. is often fun.
And I'm just lazy. Do we want to kind of try to roughly say what the topics are going to be?
Yeah.
So just kind of. So not specify that one is one thing, one is another. Just specify them.
Are these dynamic topics or set topics?
Well, the agendas are dynamic because hopefully they change every week. But
are they all general talks? Are they all theoretically general that get more specific as the meeting arrives, or do we do like general stuff on Thursday and widget stuff on Tuesday? Or
I think we should. I think we should try to create meetings that allow subsets of people to attend.
Yeah.
And so I think keeping Thursday general and then having Tuesday either on widgets or Jupyter Hub or something like that.
Oh, good.
Okay.
And let's make sure that we open the hack paths of the agendas, link to each other at the very top. So it's easy to find each other. That'll make it easier to say, oh, this topic belongs on the other one. Let's move this over to that one, because we'll probably do some of that on the agendas themselves. We'll probably do some moving around of topics.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And because the other thing is it also helps us not have the marathon 2.5-hour ones on Thursdays that every now and then end up happening, and those are painful.
Yeah, basically try to keep big topics in the Tuesday meetings.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Mistune.
So Mistune is a required dependency of the notebook.
Uh-huh.
If Python is installed, Mistune requires a compiler, and if there's no compiler, Mistune will fail to build. And right now, and where you run into this is that if you try to install IPython master on Anaconda on Mac, but there's no compiler present, IPython won't work. And I think we basically solved this now. I just hadn't removed it. One is that if there's no compiler, you just uninstall Python and everything works fine. And then Thomas has submitted a pull request to Mistune that fails gracefully if there's no compiler present. It just uses the pure Python version of Mistune. But then I saw someone added a common mark.py. Does that exist?
Yep, I saw it somewhere. Maybe the name is not that, but people are starting to implement command mark on all language now that it's flipping. And
already 054.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means, but it took like 10 years to get to that.
So you guys met with some people about.
We did.
Yeah.
We had a great chat with John McFarlane, the creator of Pandoc, who happens to also be the chair of the UC Berkeley Philosophy Department, interestingly enough. And
the implementer of all of Common Marks.
Yeah, he implemented most of the machinery behind Common Mark. And so it seems like now someone, I don't know if him or someone else implemented the Common Mark machinery in pure Python, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any sense of the extensions that we'd like to see to Markdown in terms of, being able to break out into blocks of non-Markdown code?
We definitely
and references and.
We talked a lot with him about that, and I think it was very useful in the sense that we gave him feedback and the knowledge that we have these use cases, and I think it was useful for John to understand that we have these use cases, and now we know him, and we'll probably catch up with him again in a few weeks. But I think it was a very useful line of communication to open. From what we understand, that conversation is kind of ongoing in the Common Mark forums, and the people working on Common Mark are kind of talking a lot about that. But it was useful, if nothing else, to provide him with feedback from the use cases that we have on the IPython side. So it seems like something will happen there, and we definitely are going to keep a closer eye on that conversation. But this was just a single chat over lunch. It's not like we sat down to look at code in detail.
Okay. So I guess it's probably too early to decide to switch over to Common Mark for everything.
I would say watch closely, but don't switch.
Okay.
My suggestion would be watch very closely. Let's keep an eye on it. Let's keep giving John feedback, and potentially the person implementing this thing if needed feedback. Let's not quite make that jump yet, but it is a very, very good conversation to keep having, because it may be that before too long we can make that switch.
All right.
Yep.
Wow, we're coming close to the end of the agenda. Excitement.
This is one that we can happily just say no to. It's one of those things that's been coming up for a while. There was an issue marked as 3.0 that we should consider, look at this one more time, and it's removing everything we can from external and just having dependencies. Not stop pretending we don't have dependencies.
What do we have in there?
We have pexpect. We have path, we have simple generic,
pickle share.
We have, we don't, pickle shares in utils. I'm in that PR, I moved pickle share to there because it is a package, but it's a package that doesn't install for trivial reasons on 3.4. So, and I fixed it I made a PR that fixed it. I don't know if it'll get merged because I think it's kind of a dead project. But so I think there were 4 things.
You just listed 4, yeah. I just counted 4.
It's path, decorator, pexpect, simple generic. So these are all.
And there would be 5 with pickle share.
It will, yeah. So yeah, I moved pickle share from utils to external as a temporary spinning thing, so we can make it a dependency if it becomes if the little installation issue is fixed. The package actually works fine. It just doesn't install because of bugs in the setup process.
I'm always torn on this. On the one hand, yes, what we're doing is gross. On the other hand, every time one person somewhere gets an installation error because of a dependency, that's one miserable user whose life whose day we've ruined unnecessarily. So I don't. I mean, obviously, so the big pushers against this are the distro packagers, but they tend to already patch this out, right?
Yeah, distro packagers would be happier with the change this proposal than with the current.
Well, they would be happier because they wouldn't have to do the thing they're already doing, which is remove this shit out.
Yeah.
And I mean, so they're already shipping clean packages. It's just that they have to do a bit of extra work, which
I think I think I may have interpreted the push against this in the opposite direction.
No.
push
I know that distro packages want this,
Okay.
but it's just because it simplifies their life a little bit in that they're already doing that themselves.
Yeah.
But they're already doing it, so they can keep on doing it. The question is how much are we going to, how much pain are we going to inflict in everyday users by having our dependency list grow a little bit more? Because granted, when we first made these decisions,
we have issues when, like, because we do have issues sometimes. There's a bug that's fixed in the package that's not fixed in the one we ship, and we have to make sure that we update external by copying things from upstream.
Yeah, I know. No,
Yeah,
and it is true that the when we first made these decisions, it was because really making people do the installation by hand was a complete nightmare because we didn't have paper. The situation really was objectively worse than it is now. So Matthias asked on the PR, does that mean that plain IPython is not standalone anymore?
Yeah, if you download IPython, it doesn't work.
But the other issue where I'm in favor of this is that I think after we split our repos, we're either going to have multiple copies of these things in their own externals directories of multiple projects.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a reason to ship externals in a. I think there's a case for IPython as a standalone. You download this and it works. I don't think that applies to anything else we do.
Yeah, it's only the IPython package itself that we would do.
Because we don't put Tornado in there.
Yeah.
And even there, I mean, if we're talking about splitting our traitlets module out into a separate package.
Yeah, then IPython will have a dependency.
No. Well, and the thing that I was proposing is, imagine that someone wants to run the notebook, but not the IPython kernel, and they don't even have the IPython kernel installed, but the notebook requires something in externals. Like, where do we put, if we keep the externals directory, I don't know that there's a place that we can put it.
Why would the notebook require something in externals?
I don't know if it does. I mean, I don't know today that it does, but it's not obvious to me that externals itself wouldn't introduce artificial dependencies between our different repos that we don't want to have.
I mean, externals is just there so that we can bundle in dependencies, so that no other part should load those. They should just have dependencies on the necessary things.
But this is exactly my point. Why not just like get rid of externals altogether? I think we're going to have to do that anyways.
I think we have to.
It's always ease of installation for the standalone IPython thing. Because what you're saying is, if it were possible to run a notebook without the IPython kernel installed at all, it would be because it is possible not to have dependencies on IPython itself. And at that point, you also wouldn't see what's in external. And that's it. Now, if a piece of Tornado uses, if a piece of the notebook code happens to use simple generic, then it'll be a dependency for that repo, just like Tornado is a dependency for that repo. And we're not bundling that stuff in there.
Okay. So here's a question. Do you think anyone these days actually ever installs IPython and no dependencies and uses it?
The terminal stuff?
Yeah.
I'm sure someone does, because people do far weirder things than that.
Yeah, I mean...
But
I think the one thing that this is a bit weird, but I think the thing most affected by this is the double-click installer for Windows in Gulky's packages.
Yeah.
Oh, how do those things handle dependencies?
They don't. They just don't.
They don't. Yeah.
So that would basically either you'd have to make that specially, and Matthew Brett has done some cool stuff for making double-click installers that include dependencies on Mac, and someone would need to do something like that. I think maybe Thomas might have something that addresses that.
yeah, I mean, I did when I first made PyInsist. One of the things that I tried it on was make a complete bundle IPython installer that sets up the notebook and all the dependencies you need, including Python itself, and it's pretty straightforward to do.
Yeah, and we can make that or not. I'm not sure that we need to make that, but as long as there's tools to make that, we can decide whether that should be something we do or not. Is a separate question. That to me is the most adversely affected case.
So here's my.
Spider is also affected by the external directory. For example, there was a bug in Spider. We used the possibility, to connect your remote kernel, and there was this bug in PyZMQ that got corrected recently. And as we support all versions of IPython, we have to have a logic to check for the version of IPython, of PyZMQ, which is installed, or both, to use the relevant function, and potentially to monkey patch the one that is installed. So really, I would be really in favor of completely getting rid of externals and having external dependencies, elsewhere. For if there were other future instances of this issue.
So here's I have one of two completely opposite proposals. We punt on this until 4, when we will do the repo division, which will be, because that will be a good time for cleanups anyway.
Yeah, that would be a good time for it.
Or we do it right now, so that we can see any impact of it as early as possible. Because this is one that I'm a little worried about, may have weird cascades into the installation process for other people and whatnot. So either we do it really, really now. This is not something to do like, oh, we're about to release. Shoot, we forgot to merge this one. Let's do it. No, this is one that either it goes in right now or it goes in much later.
At the same time, it shouldn't be that big an issue, because our externals mechanism already tries to load, do you have this package installed on your system, and if not, fall back to my own copy. So we should have already encountered most of the bugs from people using this with other versions.
In theory, Python packaging is easy and it always works.
Yeah. But the
user very, very in practice are the same.
Yeah, but Thomas, there should be a rule that the word "should work" can never be used whenever you're talking about Python packaging, right?
I guess all the that's a nice theory argument.
But yeah, I think
in practice, people are already using IPython with external dependencies.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying there will be no surprises. I'm saying, it's not that we always bundle everything.
But also to give a chance the pack. I don't want to be solving the packaging questions and all of those things at the last minute. When, for example, is it going to be possible to create that hypothetical Windows installer that does this? Give a chance. What's that?
And the answer is yes.
Okay, but it still all those things take time, and I don't want them piling up right before release.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. I was just saying I don't think it's quite as bad as you might think it is.
And the calendar year is beginning to run late. It's already October, and we really don't want to slip. So either we really think we want this and we do it now, or we leave it for the day when in the spring there is going to be a period of grunt work on repo stuff. And this is that kind of work. It's in that class of work. And since that will require very careful testing of all installation and packaging and dependency analysis questions. And I don't feel super strongly either way.
I don't either.
But if people really want to do it now, I'm fine. But then we do it now.
Have a poll.
Sylvan, you seem to really want this now? Would this make your life a lot easier if we did this now?
You're muted. They still have to support it for all.
Yes, I agree with that.
I'm sorry?
I was just pointing that I was in favor of doing it now. Doing it in general, if you.
No, I think we're going to do it. The question is, do we do this now or do we let it simmer? and do it when we clean up the repos.
I'll say plus
This
0.5 for
fire
now.
stuff, it's not even related to my job here. I mean, it's really more. It was more of a statement about externals than.
I am very mildly in favor of waiting on the general fear that every little thing we add between now and release is one more little thing to go wrong, and that little things compound. Friction compounds exponentially, not linearly, but if you really
of the next release.
But if you really want to do it, that's fine.
It looks like nobody feels very strongly about this one. Do we want to kind of go through and say, like, each person, what's your preference? Hands up, everybody.
Jesus. I don't really care. I mean,
okay, I'm happy. It seems like if this is gonna, let me phrase it this way: if this is gonna get done, I do want it done quickly, and which means that whoever's gonna do it takes on the responsibility of making it work cleanly. You seem to be the person who is mildly in favor of doing it quickly. So.
I mean, I can push a green button and it's done.
No. That's what I don't want.
I know, real quick.
No, that's what
Min has already done most of the work. But
the kind of checking it in the Windows stuff and whatnot. So, if you want it done, it means that you're on the hook for landing it smoothly and doing the checks and getting the Windows thing done and whatnot. And is that going to impact the much more important thing on widgets and the work on the console and the file editor that are really, really burning issues? And those three are kind of in your court.
I mean, I don't think it will, but I mean, it's always possible for things to have unexpected consequences that take a long time to sort out.
Yep.
How much do you value? If it blows up and has unexpected consequences, then yes, it knocks on work I'm doing on other things.
How much do you value your nights and weekends?
IPython time? That's what I call it.
Yeah, let's just wait on this one. We've got more important problems to solve.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
all right.
Leaving it open, marking as 4.0.
Yeah, perfect. And we will do it then. Sure.
So we do have
after we release 3.0.
We do have a number of needs decision items, pull requests.
Do a meeting tomorrow?
I can't. I'm traveling tomorrow.
We're already at the end of today.
Yeah. So
why don't we, if it's possible for people to schedule a short one later today, a quick needs decision one later today. I can't. I have an absurd backlog crunched against Strata travel that needs me out.
Let's just wait then.
Okay.
At some point, I'd also like to have a kind of look back at what we said at the dev meeting we would get done by 3.0, because I've forgotten exactly what things we said were going in and weren't, and just try to work out who's working on what we might punt on.
Yes. All that stuff is on the Trello boards. They haven't been updated. Well, some of them haven't been updated in a while, but we can.
I forgot we were using Trello. I was just going to look at the hack pad.
Yeah. No, but that's the value of that thing. It does help in that sense of getting a high-level overview of the plan. But we can touch bases on that the week after, because next week.
Matthias is wanting us to finish the last 2 points on the agenda.
Okay.
Well, Matthias is the one who might want to go to bed, so I say we honor his request.
Yes. So CodeMirror 4.
Yeah. So the last I checked, CodeMirror 4 had issues with completion and keyboard events, and it looks like everything should work now. So I can I'll hop back in.
Okay. 6221, Matthias. Yes, we will hop in.
Yep.
And not type. Oh, that's pretty. Pipes are illegal in France.
I mean, this is just the browser keyboard handling fun, right? I mean.
I think what your terminal is trying to tell you is ceci n'est pas un pipe.
Yes, exactly. That
sounds like a bug to report upstream.
Yeah.
JS, right?
Is it a Node.js problem? I have no.
No, there's no Node.
There's no Node.
code is not involved.
This is term.js, right?
Term.js, yeah.
Is it a term.js bug?
But I don't know whether it's
We have
JS or Terminado or...
Yeah, presumably, since
Okay.
there should be no there's no keyboard event handling for us.
Yeah.
on the client side, right?
Matthias, can you open at least open an issue on that thing?
I'll try to.
Check it with the Terminado demos. I will try as well. I don't
Is
think I've actually tried.
And the
anything
term.js
Python.
demos.
By the way, isn't the person who is writing that thing, the actual widget that you're using, a French person in the first place? Wasn't that a French developer? Why are you thinking that it was a
It
French
comes
developer?
originally from the French developer who did Linux compiled to JavaScript. Like he wrote the terminal as part of that.
Okay.
But then I think the guy who maintains it now is
Not.
he's
Okay.
the same person I think who maintains Marked.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Well, yeah, it's a bug.
But it's not ours.
It's a bug.
Or it might not be ours.
It needs fixing, and it may not be ours.
Probably not.
Okay. Jess had some comments on the hackpad. Oh, no, about Korea. Okay. Anything else from anyone? Last call. 11:29.
No.
Bye.
Bye, Internet.
Hi, everyone.